Hey guys, Brian Loans with BangShift here, driving the 2020 Nissan Sentra SV. The big question I'm going to answer today is whether or not this car is worth the $21,000 price tag. Whether the styling, whether the performance, and whether the interior amenities are worth spending that much money for this particular class of car. It should be mentioned that the 2020 Nissan Sentra SV is basically all new. Why? Well, the last generation Nissan Sentra had gotten pretty long in the tooth, and with all of Nissan's competitors bringing out new cars in this particular small car space, they really were at a disadvantage in terms of their offerings. When people would shop a Toyota, when they would shop Hyundai and Kia offerings, when they would shop a Honda, they all looked a lot and felt a lot different than what Nissan was offering up until last year. Well, with the release of this car for 2020, they have not only caught the competition, in many ways, by my estimation, they have actually gone past them. We'll talk about what is good about this car, what is great about this car, and what I think can be and probably will be improved in its further generations. For starters, the answer to the question of whether this car is worth the $20,000 asking price, I'm not going to hide it from you. It is. And I'm going to start by saying it is because, first, on styling. When you look at a 2020 Nissan Sentra, it may appear to be very closely resemblant of other members, more expensive members, of the Nissan family. And you would be correct on that. It is done this way by design. Aligning the styling of the Altima, the Sentra, and the Maxima has allowed Nissan to really do something special here. If people are appealed to by the styling of the 2020 Nissan Sentra, there's a great chance that when they have more money in their pocket, they'll upgrade to a car like an Altima or even a Maxima down the road. They've already made the investment in this styling. We know that they like it already if they bought one of these cars, so it only makes sense that down the road they'd be more willing to shell out a couple more bucks for more performance and more luxury amenities. I do like the exterior. I think it looks like a far more expensive car than a $20,000 car. This being the SV trim level, it has a nicer wheel and tire package on it. If you go up to the SR trim level, you pick up a little more in the wheel diameter and tire as well. So, as you move up the trim level, the refinement of the exterior does improve to match the increasing price tag. This being said, when you look at a 2020 Nissan Sentra, the first thing you think about isn't, oh man, that looks like a $20,000 car. What you think of is you go, is that an Altima? Or is that some other thing? That's actually a Sentra. That's probably what Nissan was looking to do, and for me, that is the first signal that this is a car that over-delivers on its price tag. The interior amenities and styling of this car also scores high marks with me. I'm not the smallest guy in the world. I fit in this car very well. I'm in a comfortable driving position that still allows plenty of legroom for my 6-foot-tall son to fit in the back without jamming his knees into the back of my seat. The seats are Nissan's zero-gravity seats, and while that may sound like a gimmick, whatever they have done designing these seats has been highly effective, and they are, in my opinion, the best seats you can get in the mid-range trim on any car in this particular class of automobile that you could buy today. The zero-gravity seats have an interesting foam and bolstering combination that really contours and conforms to your body. Whether you're somebody of a slight build or somebody like me that's a little bit wider and heavier, these really are incredibly comfortable. And the zero gravity thing isn't really a gimmick. It does kind of feel like you're being very well supported here, and the side bolstering's nice, but it's not over the top. Legroom, as I mentioned, is very good in this car. You will fit 5 adult-sized people, 4 real comfortably, 5 you can get 3 across the back. But definitely with 4 people in this car, you can go on a road trip and nobody's going to be complaining of being very sore or very contorted in the back seat. Plenty of room there. In terms of the interior driver's area layout, I do like the fact that what Nissan has concentrated on, as much as they concentrated on upgrading the exterior appearance of this car, on the inside they concentrated on bringing the materials up to a higher level. So the interior materials on this machine are very nice. The steering wheel has a leather wrap on it. There is some stitching across the dashboard. In the SV trim that we have, you have this really big and nice touchscreen here. The dual function of the touchscreen I like a lot, and the fact that, yes, it is the touchscreen, but that second function I mentioned is a row of buttons across the bottom. If you're somebody that doesn't like to be using a touchscreen and more prefers a more tactile button, you have that option here, as those buttons are right across the bottom. Super easy to scroll through the channels, easy to use. The interface as far as your satellite radio and other entertainment options are very, very good. So HVAC controls also follow that same style. You have 3 big vents here in the center of the car that you can tune and change and direct in any way you'd like. You have very simple controls across the bottom of the stack to control your dual zone climate. Again, another feature on a $20,000 car that I wasn't expecting necessarily to find on a $20,000 car, which is dual zone climate control. How about handling? How does it feel to drive the car? Well, I will tell you that the ride is not the most supple thing, but it's also not overly stiff. So what you end up with is what I would consider a very typical ride for a small sedan like this. It does not feel cheap, but it also does not feel overly luxuriant. You will not be struck either way, in my opinion, as far as the ride and handling of the 2020 Sentra. It does what you think it's going to do. It delivers what you think it will deliver for this price point for a car this size. Is that a negative? I don't think so. If this was a car that was trying to purport itself to be a performance car, then I'd have something negative to say. The reality is, it's a fairly light, fairly composed small car, which does have its moments to throw around in the corners. I mean, it's got 205 tires on it, so there is a little bit of grip there, and there's some fun to be had when you get to the bends. For instance, an off-ramp on the highway or an on-ramp, you can lean into this car a little bit, and it doesn't really yell too far back at you. Body rolls at a minimum, but again, I wouldn't classify this as a performance car. I wouldn't classify this as some sort of an exceptionally well-handling car, but I would not classify this as a car that underperforms your expectation of a small sedan in everyday driving, whether we're talking about the rutted roads of your town or rolling down the highway making the speed limit. In terms of horsepower and performance, well, that may be another story. This is one of the areas where I feel like the 2020 Nissan Sentra doesn't necessarily meet my full expectation of what I would like to see as far as acceleration and that type of thing go. Again, I'm not trying to say this is a performance car that's underperforming. I'm simply saying for a small sedan, I would like to see a little bit more sprightly performance. 0 to 60 in 9.2 seconds isn't bad, but it certainly isn't something that's going to attract a lot of people in on the fun factor side of things. This is not a car that you're going to struggle to merge on the highway with. This is not a car you're going to struggle to pass people with. But this is also not a car that's going to raise the hair in the back of your neck when you hit the throttle. One of the reasons for this, perhaps, is the CVT transmission. Now, normally I would have a lot of negative things to say about CVT transmission-equipped cars because I typically don't like them. I can't say that I'm in love with this one, but I will say that Nissan has done something here that makes this the best driving CVT transmission-equipped car that we've ever had here at BangShift for a road test. What they've done is program this transmission to basically act as though it is a traditional automatic. Meaning, as you drive, it shifts, quote-unquote, through the gears. Instead of feeling this kind of slip-slidey motion of the revs kind of just gradually rising and falling, which is what a CVT is supposed to do. It's supposed to keep the car in that really nice fat horsepower and torque range of the engine to give you the best performance. There's nothing wrong with any of that. The problem I've always had with CVT transmissions is that they take a lot of the fun out of the driving experience, and not just versus a manual transmission, but even versus a typical automatic. Because the Sentra has had this type of stepped programming into its CVT, it really does maybe trick the driver a little bit into thinking that it has a normal automatic. I feel like this has a dual purpose. One, for the folks that are considering buying this car and for the folks that are selling this car, meaning Nissan dealership salesmen and women, it makes their job a lot easier. When you take someone out to drive a CVT car that has never driven a CVT car before, and they don't understand how that transmission works, they think there's a problem because they're used to a car rising and falling in RPM. They're not used to a car rising and hanging there. Many people that aren't technically savvy immediately peg that as a slipping transmission. So when you have that initial response on a test drive that the salesman now has to overcome and explain what's happening, I feel like that has been a hard row to hoe for Nissan in this whole CVT program. When a traditional car buyer gets in the Sentra that may not be very technically savvy and drives it, they will think there's a normal automatic transmission there. To the point, I would bet that people don't even bring up the fact that it has a CVT, and most people probably don't even know what that is. It's interesting, and again, not my favorite thing in the world, but to Nissan's credit, they've done a better job than anybody I've ever experienced in tuning this thing to act like a normal transmission. One thing that it's missing gravely that I would like to see is some sort of manual control ability on the transmission, whether that is a gate on the shifter that I can pop the shifter into and manually, quote-unquote, shift the CVT between its ranges, or if that is paddles on the back of the steering wheel I could use. That's really the place I'd like to see this car improve, and I think that it will. My theory is this: The 2020 Nissan Sentra is being unveiled to the world in the most mass market way possible, which makes business sense, right? You don't roll a car out with a niche performance model that a very small number of people want. They've rolled this car out in a very nice way. The 3 trim levels make it easy to shop, and the 3 trim levels make it easy to decide what model, what variation of the luxury you'd like to buy. Going forward, as people become familiarized with this car, as people look at it and say, I love the way that looks, I wish it had a little more power, that is when they can roll a performance model in, and I believe that is when they will roll a performance model in. I can't foresee Nissan giving up this part of the market in terms of not competing with a Toyota Corolla S or not competing with a Honda Civic Si by simply not offering a performance version of the 2020 Sentra. It's just going to take some time to get here. Overall, it's a great car. It just needs a little bit more oomph. So the bottom line for me in the 2020 Nissan Sentra is that this is a car that is priced well below how it performs, which is something you can very rarely say. The price point on this test vehicle we have here is just right around $20,000, about $20,700, give or take. If you're a savvy car buyer, you can probably beat them up a little bit at the dealership and get it even cheaper than that. But the bottom line for me is this car looks and drives in many respects like a $30,000 car. Given an additional 20 to 30 horsepower out of this engine, I would say that it absolutely drives like a $30,000 car. Right now, it's just a little bit laggy on the performance side of things in terms of acceleration and in terms of driving excitement. Give me some paddles and a little bit more horsepower, not as the dedicated performance model, but in this SV trim, and then we really be talking about something. It looks better than the $20,000 price tag. It drives better than the $20,000 price tag. It has a tactile feel inside better than the $20,000 price tag. What does it need? It needs a little bit more horsepower. It needs a little bit more ability for me as a driver to engage with the car a little bit more. Rather than just sit in it, hit the start button and go, which is what the majority of buyers will do, I would like just a little bit more spunk out of this thing to give it a little more personality. Other than that, I would definitely recommend this car to anybody in this price range. If you're going to be shopping for a car around $20,000, a car that's going to be a commuter vehicle, a car that's going to perhaps take your kid back and forth to college, a car that needs to last a long time and not cost you a lot of money, I would absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, recommend shopping the 2020 Nissan Sentra. If you're looking for a small performance-minded car, I would wait on the Nissan Sentra. I wouldn't write it off. What I would do is I would wait, because there has to be, in my heart of hearts, I have to believe that at some point down the road there will be a more performance variant of this car coming. And when it does, I feel as though it'll stack up very well with the Honda and the Toyota offerings in this segment, as well as those from the South Korean manufacturers. If you're looking for something that hits this $20,000 price point, something that delivers a nice driving experience, something that will not embarrass you in front of your friends, and something you can be proud of to have in the driveway, I have to say that the 2020 Nissan Sentra SV is a car you should waltz into a dealership and take a look at. Compare it to its competitors on styling, on handling, on tactile feel and interior design, and then let me know what you think in the comments below.